If you're going to Vegas, check out Terry at the Mirage. New show starts on
Friday. Fox News alert the actor Jussie Smollett fighting back, telling his castmates reportedly he did not fake this hate crime. Good morning, everybody. You've almost made it through the week. I'm Bill Hammer, live in New York City. Big welcome back to you, Heather.
And what a week it has been.
Yes, indeed.
I'm Heather Childers in for Sandra Smith again. Jussie Smollett released on bond after prosecutors outlined their case against the 36-year-old actor, accusing him of orchestrating an assault on himself and then claiming that he was the victim of a racist and homophobic attack.
Smollett asked Ola if he could trust him. When Ola said he could, Smollett detailed his plans of the attack to the brothers. Smollett stated that he wanted them to appear to attack him on the evening of January 28, 2019, near his apartment building in Streeterville.
So Smollett's lawyer is firing back overnight. They're going after the police. Quote, the presumption of innocence, a bedrock in the search for justice, was trampled upon at the expense of Mr. Smollett, end quote. Matt Finn back on the story live in the streets of Chicago. Matt.
Bill, Heather, this city's police superintendent and the state's attorney's office slamming Jussie Smollett, saying he orchestrated this elaborate hoax and set up a alleged false fake death threat letter because he was upset about how much he was being paid and because he wanted to advance his career. Well, now Jussie Smollett's legal team is fighting back, saying in a statement, quote, Mr. Smollett is a young man of impeccable character and integrity who fiercely and solemnly maintains his innocence and feels betrayed by a system that apparently wants to skip due process and proceed directly to sentencing. Smollett's attorney also successfully argued he'd be released on bond, telling the judge in a packed courtroom that Smollett gives to and is involved in charities and because Fox Studios is still standing by him. The latest statement from 20th Century Fox reads, quote, we understand the seriousness of this matter and we respect the legal process. We are evaluating the situation and we are considering our options. That is a slight bit of change in tone from 20th Century Fox that in previous statements really stood by Jussie Smollett. They now say they're considering their options. Also in court yesterday, the judge publicly chastised Smollett, saying if the part about the noose is true, it's outrageous because it conjures up the most evil part of this country's history. Chicago's police superintendent says Chicago embraced this actor and then he slapped the city in the face.
Why would anyone, especially an African-American man, use the symbolism of a noose to make false accusations? How could someone look at the hatred and suffering associated with that symbol and see an opportunity to manipulate that symbol to further his own public profile?
The FBI is also investigating that alleged death threat letter, and if it's determined that Smollett played a part in that letter or sent it to himself, Smollett faces some serious federal charges. And we do know that Jussie Smollett left jail yesterday and arrived to the Fox Studios, where it cannot confirm if he is working just yet. 20th Century Fox this morning is not confirming if he is back on the set and working, but he did arrive here yesterday right after he left jail. Bill, Heather.
Finn, thank you. We'll talk to you throughout the morning here in Chicago, leading our coverage today. Thanks.
Well, the White House backing off plans for a full troop withdrawal from Syria, announcing that 200 U.S. service members will remain in the country as a peacekeeping force for now. The move coming as President Trump faces some pressure to protect Kurdish forces who supported the fight against ISIS and may now be threatened by Turkey. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders saying only a small peacekeeping group of about 200 will remain in Syria for a period of time. Now, Kevin Corke is live at the White House. So, Kevin, what is the White House thinking on Syria?
The idea is simple, actually. It's called transitional security. Now, for the people at home that may not have understood or heard about this story before, the president insisted that we get American troops out of there. They've been there long enough. Their mission has been very defined, and so he wanted U.S. troops to get out of Syria broadly. Now, that said, they want a responsible removal of U.S. forces from the zone, and clearly they don't want to create a strategic vacuum. So some troops, as you point out, will remain.
This is a rough estimate, about 200, not a specific number. We're in constant contact with our allies. At the end of the day, the president wants to bring our troops home, and he's working towards that. He wants to do that in a safe and peaceful way.
I'm always going to be happy with the president pulling our men and women in harm's way out of harm's way and also doing so responsibly. I agree. I believe that the 200 that are remaining will keep Turkey out of the Syrian conflict, but will also keep Iran's ambitions at bay.
John James there. Lindsey Graham, meanwhile, senator from the great state of South Carolina, said this in a statement. This will ensure ISIS does not return and that Iran does not fill the vacuum that would have been left if we completely withdrew. Now, you may also recall that the president's decision to call for troop pullout from Syria really was frankly criticized by some and raised eyebrows, to say the least, over the Pentagon. So this decision to leave at least a small cadre of fighting forces there in a support role primarily will be met with welcome, we imagine, of the Pentagon.
Yeah, well, so there's another issue today. What is the White House saying about this lawsuit by the family of the ISIS bride?
Yeah, they are aware of the lawsuit and understand that as this review continues, a couple of things are very important, and most notably that is the status of the individual that has been named. We talked about her yesterday. Hoda Mathana was born in New Jersey. She was born to a diplomatic parent. Her father was a diplomat from Yemen. Now, he says, and there's some documentation that suggests this is true, he ended his mission a month before she was born. But there's also some legal wiggle room there. There are some who would say that as long as you are here under that type of visa, you have to leave the country, then come back on a separate visa. Thus, she's not an American citizen. Let me read part of the lawsuit. It says this: they're seeking an injunctive relief, preventing the U.S. government from unconstitutionally robbing her and her son of their rights as U.S. citizens, that is. Now, her attorney is obviously saying, look, I want her to be able to come here and have due process rights like any other American. Mike Pompeo, however, has been very strong in his contention that she's simply not an American. And let me share part of a statement we got from him yesterday. We also saw him on our air with Mornings with Maria Bartiromo over on Fox Business. He said this is a woman who inflicted enormous risk on American soldiers, on American citizens. She's a terrorist. She's not coming back. That sentiment echoed by the president. We saw a tweet where he said he and Pompeo agreed she's not due to come back here. So it's a very interesting story, one that will now make its way through the courts.
All right, we'll see. Kevin Corke, live for us. Thank you, Kevin. Well, the decision to keep some of those troops in Syria, going back to that, earning some praise from lawmakers, including Senator Lindsey Graham. He a critic of the initial withdrawal plan, and we'll have more on this when the senator joins us in studio at 10:30.
Looking forward to talking to him. Meantime, got a Fox News alert breaking from the Hill at the moment. House Democrats a moment ago, taking aim at the president's border security push, they just introduced a resolution aimed at blocking the emergency declaration. Now, Democrats in the Senate planning a similar move when to bring in Matt Schlapp. Matt's the former White House political director, chairman of the American Conservative Union, joins us from D.C. Matt, good morning to you. Likely going to pass in the House. What's the effect of this, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this sets up one of the most important themes or conversations the country's going to have heading into the presidential campaign in 2020. And that's this basic question. Do we secure our southern border, or do we do just the opposite? Do we outlaw ICE? Do we deplete these funds? And do we allow people to simply walk into America when they want to?
All right. Chuck Schumer says they'll do the same thing in the Senate. Here's a statement from the Senate Minority Leader. This issue transcends partisan politics, and I urge all senators, Democrats and Republicans, to support this resolution to terminate the president's emergency declaration when it comes up for a vote in the Senate. Apparently, there's a provision in that bill that requires the Senate to vote on this within 18 days. So it's going to happen. They need 4 Republicans to join them. Susan Collins of Maine already indicated that she will. Do you think they'll get there, Matt?
I think they have a chance, definitely, in the Senate to get the Republicans they need. But remember, there's 2 important things here, Bill, to remember, which is if a bill were to pass the House and the Senate, the president will most assuredly veto it. They'd need 2/3 to override. So there's no chance this emergency declaration is stopped. The second thing is you just said that they have to pick it up within 18 days. You know why, Bill? Because Congress passed a law that allows presidents to declare emergencies. That's why we've had over 50 declared. We have over 30 currently in effect. the law was passed, and President Trump is simply following that law.
You're making the case that you can win on this politically. That's what you stated.
We can win. We can win legislatively and definitely win politically. The American people don't think it makes sense to have a porous southern border where drugs and terrorists and people in gangs can just walk into our country. They don't like it, and we should be able to win that argument.
Let's take our discussion overseas. Next week's a big week, Matt. Here is Sarah Sanders just from last hour about the summit with Chairman Kim in Hanoi, Vietnam.
We're making progress. The president's in no hurry, particularly as long as things continue to move forward in a positive manner and as long as the conversations continue to go well. Again, we'll see what happens. I think that the only one setting high expectations is probably the media because they're looking for reasons to attack this president.
So we'll see what we get from this, Matt. At the same time, so you've got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, essentially, for all the action in Hanoi, Vietnam. On Wednesday at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, House Democrats will have Michael Cohen publicly testify about payments that were made prior to the election in 2016. At the same time, you're going to have a split screen with the president negotiating on nuclear war with Chairman Kim. Do you think that hearing continues? If so, what about the water's edge, a commander-in-chief overseas? How does that look? How does that appear in such a significant week for this presidency, Matt?
That's a great question, Bill. I don't like the optics of it. I think we have one president. Barack Obama was my president. Donald Trump is my president. And when they're overseas doing the nation's business, especially on something which is so bipartisan, every American can agree it would be better for the world if the Korean Peninsula was denuclearized. And so I do think it looks like they're playing politics. My guess is Nancy Pelosi, AOC, and her gang in the caucus will continue to look as political as they need to keep their socialist base happy. So I don't look for any changes on that. And when it comes to North Korea, I think the president's doing the right thing, Bill. Remember, we haven't seen them testing missiles. We haven't seen, the threat of a horrible weapon landing in our territories or in Hawaii. This is a big step. Just talking to the North Korean dictator has created a change in the dynamic, and we could go further because the experts in North Korea I talk to tell me that North Korea is in a terrible bind when it comes to their finances. They actually need to change the dynamics, or it's not just their people who will starve, but the Kim family itself.
If that's the case, if you don't push it forward, you can crank up the sanctions yet again. My point, Matt, is that the next 7 days will be significant on both fronts, with the Mueller report hanging out there, the Cohen testimony in this North Korean summit overseas. Thank you, Matt.
That's right. Thanks, Bill.
Slap there in Washington. That summit with Chairman Kim begins on Tuesday. I'll be there in Hanoi for America's Newsroom, along with my colleagues. And on Sunday night, Ed Henry's going to kick off our coverage, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Check out Ed Sunday night here on the Fox News Channel as we go all week next week from Vietnam.
Exciting to be there. Well, a judge refusing to grant bail for the U.S. Coast Guard officer accused of plotting to kill prominent journalists and Democratic politicians. The latest details on what's being described as a plot to murder civilians on a scale rarely seen.
Also, major developments in a key House race still up in the air from last November. Why we might need a brand new election.
Yeah, I'm familiar with where that's happening. And Jussie Smollett telling his Empire castmates that he's innocent as his attorney fires back at Chicago police over their handling of the investigation. So where does the case go now?
Absolute justice would be an apology to this city that he smeared, admitting what he did.
America's Newsroom is brought to you by Aspen Dental. We help you get the care
Well, House Democrats introducing a resolution challenging President Trump's national emergency declaration at the southern border with a vote planned for early next week. Chuck Schumer saying that Senate Democrats plan a very similar move. So let's bring in Congressman Sean Duffy for more on this. First of all, thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you, Heather. Thanks for having me on.
So we have some sound that just came in from the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi talking about separation of powers versus patriotism. Listen to what she had to say.
We do not have a monarch. We have a separation of powers in our country. Our privilege resolution will restore our system of checks, will reassert our system of checks and balances and our constitutional responsibilities imbued in the Congress. This issue transcends partisan politics. This isn't about politics. It's not about partisanship. It's about patriotism.
So what do you think about what she had to say?
So first off, this is absolutely about partisan politics from Nancy Pelosi and Democrats. Most Americans agree, Heather, that we should secure the border. They agree that we should have some kind of wall or barrier to stop people from coming into our country. So I think she's mistaken there. They're the resist movement. They're open border Democrats in opposition to most of where Americans are today. But not only that, you can't forget that it's the Congress that gave the president the authority for using the national emergency declarations to actually protect the American people. So the Congress gave this authority to the president. I agree in checks and balances. I agree that the Congress is a co-equal branch, but the Congress gave the president this authority to actually protect the American people. Where I live, I'm in Wausau, Wisconsin. In my part of Wisconsin, we have meth and heroin that are rampant throughout our community, destroying families, crushing our budgets. We need to secure the border to make sure we keep our people safe.
So Congress gave him this ability. Are you saying that he was right in making this move to give him some additional money in order to complete the wall?
Yeah, so listen, I think he's doing the right thing to secure the border. I think it's a national emergency when you have hundreds of thousands of people storming our border. We don't know who they are, whether they're gang members, criminals, sex traffickers, drug dealers. So yeah, I'm standing with the president in this action. We do all, as conservatives, have concerns with, how does President Elizabeth Warren deal with this? Does she say there's a national emergency with climate change or with guns? And so I think what's going to happen, this is not going to pass the House, Heather. It will pass the House. Yeah. I'm not sure if it'll pass the Senate, but the president will veto it. So really, this is just a political play by Democrats. This national emergency issue will be determined in the courts, and I'm sure they'll put some guardrails around how a president can use this authority. It's yet to be determined, how they're going to decide.
You mentioned Warren and her response to something like this. Another 2020 Democratic candidate, Amy Klobuchar. Let's listen to what she had to say on this in Iowa yesterday.
You see every single day that President Trump is trying to undermine our Constitution. I thought an emergency was floods in Iowa, okay? I thought that an emergency was wildfires in Colorado or a hurricane in Florida. But he has put that on its head. I don't think it's going to be found constitutional, but that's the kind of games that he is playing with our Constitution.
What do you think?
You know what, when people are dying in my community from meth and heroin, that 95% of it comes across the southern border, I call that an emergency. When we have little girls that are sexually assaulted and raped on the journey from Central America to our border because it's open, I call that an emergency. Shame on Democrats. Let's secure the border. The Congress should do its job so the president doesn't have to act on his own and secure the border by himself. And if Democrats would get off the open border initiative and just do what's right. I mean, listen, Heather, they were in favor of border security just 8-10 years ago, but they're only now in opposition because it's President Trump as the president, and he ran on securing the border. And because of the resist movement, they refuse to do what's right by way of the American people, which is send the money to the border, give the Border Patrol agents what they're asking for, which is more tools, more agents, and barriers. They're not partisan, they're not political. Most of them are minorities, and they say we need these tools to protect the American people. Yeah. So Democrats, stop playing politics.
And I've talked with plenty.
And let's do what's right by way of the American people.
I've talked to plenty of the ranchers and farmers down there on the border along these states, and they say it is desperately needed. Sean Duffy, thank you so much for joining us. Congressman Duffy, thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
21 past, some more chaos from Venezuela. Deadly clashes after the Maduro regime closes the country's border with its neighbor. The White House still fighting this. We'll tell you what's happening on that today. Also, ISIS fighters facing defeat in Syria. Reports that they're moving across the border into Iraq as the White House changes strategy. Get a live report on that coming up as well.
Looking good.
.30 here in New York. Earlier this week, Russian President Vladimir Putin threatening to target the U.S. with new hypersonic missiles if it deploys the U.S. new missiles in Europe. So the back and forth now coming 5 years after Russia invaded and annexed Crimea from Ukraine. I spoke with the Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko about that this week. Mr. President, welcome. It's great to see you here in New York City.
Thank you for the invitation.
You know, there is a lot of debate in this country over Vladimir Putin. How are we to understand what you believe his motives are?
Look, today is a very right time to asking me this question, because exactly today, this is the 5 years ago, on the 20th of February, we have two very dramatic events in Ukrainian history. First, that was a launching for the illegal annexation of the Crimea. Putin gave an order to his troops to attack Ukraine. And second, we have a very tragic events on the Maidans of Independence, the central square of Ukraine, where pro-Putin forces open the fire against the peaceful protesters who just demanding the European future for their country. And can you imagine that that was Putin who done that? Because for Putin, the collapse of Soviet Union was the biggest catastrophe of the 20th century. Neither World War II, no any nuclear bombs, no Holocaust, no the Soviet Union. And this is completely difficult to understand the Putin motives, but he wants to renew, to restore the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, and he do not have any red line for reaching this result.
You clearly believe that's a threat to your people and your country. I think 7% of Ukraine has been annexed. I believe that is what you think today. Our president wants to get along with Putin. He has said that he would like to do that. Do you see anything wrong with that?
I think that it's possible to speak with Putin only with a position of strength. If the global coalition would be strong enough, if sanction, which is extremely efficient, will work, if the all instrument of pressure which we have, the whole world has in their hands, this conversation can be efficient.
Have you met Putin?
Yes, many times.
And you spoke to him last?
Last time it was the attempt to speak with him by phone was exactly at the date when Putin made an aggression against my boat and was unprovoked fire to injure 3 of my sailors, make a storm in the neutral water of the Black Sea, and I just called him and said, what's going on? And he don't answer, because he has nothing to answer.
There's a U.S. warship that will be steaming off the eastern coast of Ukraine, I believe in about a week, about 5 days from now.
Yeah.
What are you asking of this U.S. government?
We should increase the NATO presence in the Black Sea, because after illegal annexation of the Crimea, what we discussed today in the General Assembly, in the 5th anniversary of the aggression, we said that after the annexation annexation of the Crimea, it was completely ruined the balance in the Black Sea, because Putin used the land of the Crimea for placing up the missiles there, for significantly increasing the Black Sea fleet, and this is create extremely big danger for the destabilization or even to aggression in the Black Sea, like it happened against Ukrainian Navy.
But
that's why Navy presence of NATO, it would be the factor for stabilization.
It would appear this administration has your back. I don't know if you agree with that or not. Do you?
I think that this administration do an excellent, a great job. And this is not only sanction. For example, presenting Javelin, this is the modern anti-tank system. Even psychologically, when Russia understands that we theoretically can have a Javelin, Russian tanker refuse to go to open the shelling, to appear there. And this is save a lots of life for Ukrainian soldiers. This is bring significantly more stability. And now we receive radio electronic warfare, now we receive the Javelin. We have an effective negotiation about the support for defensive weapons. And with all these things, we are very much appreciate to the American people who strongly support us, for bipartisan support in the United States Congress, and for the very strong support of U.S. administration.
A couple quick questions here. Hillary Clinton had the reset button. Barack Obama told Mitt Romney that Russia was not the biggest concern of the U.S. government. Do you see a different approach under this administration than we had prior?
I have a feeling that U.S. administration clearly understand the possible danger of Putin, despite of any of their statement. And with this situation, we have in Ukrainian the proverb that they should keep power dry. And with this situation, I'm absolutely confident that only strong U.S., the global leadership of the United States, and the leadership of the President Trump can keep the world safe.
Keep your powder dry is what we say on this side of the ocean. Last question. You know, there's a long-standing debate here in the U.S. as to how much Russia interfered with our election in 2016, propaganda, etc. You deal with this as well. What do we need to understand from your experience?
Look, it is extremely important election in Ukraine, because just a few days ago we vote constitutional changes about the obligatory membership for NATO and membership for European Union for Ukraine. This is very clear message that if today Russia said that they will be possible attack of the United States, we consider as a future NATO member that attack on the United States is attack on Ukraine. And I think that the global unity and global solidarity, this is the only factor who can stop it. And this we protect during our election. When anybody said that we should, for example, if Russia stopped shelling on the east of my country, it would be peace. It would be end of aggression. If Ukraine stopped shelling, stopped protecting their sovereignty and territorial integrity, it would be finish of Ukraine. And with this situation, definitely, we should be strong enough. We should protect during the election the European choice of our nation. We should be together with the global coalition. We should have a clear prospects of NATO and European Union membership. And this would be the responsible choice of Ukrainian people on the 31st of October during the election. President.
Appreciate your time. 5 years on since Crimea. Mr. President, thank you for being
Thanks
here.
a lot. Thank you, Bill.
Appreciate it.
Well, another Fox News alert for you. Facing defeat in Syria, ISIS fighters now heading across the border to Iraq, threatening that country's fragile security. Benjamin Hall is tracking this story for us from London.
Hi, Heather. And for some time there have been reports that ISIS were planning to regroup in these parts of western Iraq. And we've heard for some time these figures, 20 to 30,000 ISIS supporters still at large across Iraq or Syria. Well, now, evidence that that is exactly what they seem to be doing and where they hope perhaps to regroup. According to US and Iraqi officials, ISIS fighters facing defeat in that final sliver of land in Syria have for some time been slipping across the nearby border into Iraq. And there are indications that as they lose their territory in Syria, the group is widening its reach in Iraq. It's believed that more than 1,000 ISIS fighters have managed to avoid capture by SDF forces and have crossed the open desert border in the last 6 months, defying a massive operation by US, Kurdish, Iraqi and allied forces to stamp out the remnants of the terror group. The Iraqi army has deployed more than 20,000 troops to guard that frontier, but militants are using tunnels and the cover of night to get across. ISIS cells operating in at least 4 northern western provinces are carrying out kidnappings, assassinations and ambushes, trying to restore the extortion rackets that once brought them so much wealth. It's believed that there are between 5,000 and 7,000 ISIS fighters in Iraq alone, and that they're hiding out in remote desert areas. They have been known to enter Iraq carrying currency and light weapons, and then dig up money and weapons that they had stashed when they were on the back foot and fleeing. It does make sense that ISIS would go back and pull back to these parts of western Iraq. It's the Sunni heartland. It's where they grew strong. It's where Al-Qaeda in Iraq and ISIS in Iraq first came from. And it's also where they believe that ISIS leader al-Baghdadi is hiding. It does appear now as if that might become the focus once the battle in Syria is over. Heather?
All right, Benjamin Hall, live for us. Thank you.
That's some breaking news on this from Chicago now on the Jussie Smollett matter, and there is more reaction to the police news of yesterday in a moment here.
Ed described this very well yesterday. He called it a despicable crime. And when you hear his presentation and the presentation of the state's attorney, there's almost an embarrassment of evidence here against Smollett.
So we are hearing from the show's producers. We'll tell you what they're saying in a moment here on this case. Heather?
Plus, the Alabama woman who went to Syria and joined ISIS wants to come back home. The Trump administration saying that's not happening. Now her family is taking some action.
As an American citizen, Huda herself and her family simply want to face our legal system. She's willing to pay whatever debts she has to society. She's even willing to spend years behind bars if that's the debt she owes.
It was time to update the bathroom.
We got this news from the White House saying about 200 U.S. members will stay in Syria. U.S. service members backing off the president's call for a full withdrawal. That move earning some praise from the Hill, including Senator Lindsey Graham, who was with us last hour.
I think it's a very smart decision by the president. He listened to sound military advice. He adjusted his policies. The goal is to make sure ISIS doesn't come back. If we'd have kept troops in Iraq, we would never had ISIS. Now that the caliphate's destroyed, and it really has been destroyed, congratulations, Mr. President, on making that happen.
No word on a timeline. The White House saying that the small group will be there for a, quote, period of time.
When defense attorneys don't have any facts, they go to process. And they're trying to throw enough smoke up there to establish reasonable doubt in the minds of the prospective jurors. That's what this is all about.
Well, former Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis reacting to the Jussie Smollett case. And now Empire show producers say the actor's character will not appear in this season's last 2 episodes. Mercedes Cohen is an attorney and a Fox News contributor, and she joins us now with a little more insight on this. Thank you so much for joining us. Nice to see you.
Great to see you, Heather. Thanks
so you heard Ed talking there now. He was saying, they just throw up a lot of smoke. So where do they stand in terms of defending him?
Well, it's interesting because right now all we know is that he's going to be charged, at least in the state, with respect to these false accusations, the hoax that he created. But there's also a federal investigation that's brewing because it's being reported that he may have even sent a letter to himself, that threatening letter that talks about that basically with white powder in it, some sort of terrorist threat. That's much more significant because the state claim it's really something that they're going to, the defense will start to plant the seeds. What are they? Well, let's talk about the process, exactly what the soundbite was. They're going to turn around and say, how was the evidence collected? Let's focus on the 2 witnesses that came forward and claimed that they were part of the hoax. Well, was there a deal? Was there a plea deal that was given to these individuals? Once you start to attack the process, attack law enforcement, or their biases in the law enforcement, we've heard some rumors about biases from the law enforcement in terms of collecting the evidence. When you start poking holes on that, that's where there can be some traction. Well, when the facts are against you, you attack the process.
And it's interesting because they certainly have already started that. We have this quote from his defense team, Smollett's defense team, and they say, amongst other things, today we witnessed an organized law enforcement spectacle that has no place in the American legal system. The presumption of innocence, a bedrock in the search for justice, trampled upon at the expense of Mr. Smollett. Mr. Smollett is a young man of impeccable character and integrity who fiercely and solemnly maintains his innocence. He was betrayed by a system that apparently wants to skip due process and proceed directly to sentencing. Strong words.
Great PR machine behind Jussie Smollett. I mean, that's what it is. We're talking about a huge PR, very effective campaign. But the bottom line is this: what due process has been trampled upon? He was able to appear in court. He's represented by counsel. He's going to face whatever the charges are. He'll know what the charges are. He'll get a jury of his peers if he doesn't plead guilty. That's the due process. All the constitutional rights that he has are still in place and are going to be effectuated as he continues down the judicial process. So it's just a great PR. It's because, frankly, when you look at the facts that are against them, at least what we know today, it's pretty daunting, and the defense has to do what they possibly can to stem the tide.
Yeah, it seems incredibly extensive. But in terms of justice, if he is found guilty, although he is still maintaining his innocence from what we hear at this point, if found guilty, what would constitute justice? What about the amount of manpower that Chicago put out? You heard the police superintendent yesterday, and he is angry, justifiably so, because this took away a lot of manpower from other legitimate cases that were going on.
Sure. Great point, Heather. I mean, frankly, there could be restitution. That could be part of the sentencing. If he's found guilty, he may have to pay what amounted to this type of law enforcement exposure. Could be tens of thousands. Sometimes you've seen in some of these other cases, the Running Bride is the case that I have in mind, where she was forced to pay the restitution to the state for all of law enforcement looking for her when she said she was allegedly kidnapped.
Yeah. So
there's lots of case law out there that says you can actually pay for all these efforts.
Interesting that you mentioned a bride, because just quickly, before we let you go, I want to talk about this Alabama ISIS bride and the situation going on with her, where they're saying, Secretary Pompeo said she cannot come back to the United States, but now her family and attorneys are fighting to allow her to return.
The key issue, Heather, on that is when she was born, whether her father was still a diplomat. If you have a diplomat in the United States has a child in the United States, they are not deemed an American citizen. So the question is, at least it's being reported that he had actually become a permanent resident. He resigned as a diplomat, became a permanent resident before she was born in the United States. So it really is about the timing of that. She was born in 1994. There's some reports saying that he relinquished his diplomatic card in 1992 and became a permanent resident. If a permanent resident has a child in the United States, they are considered under the immigration laws, at least deemed an American citizen. I don't know if they have to actually do any sort of adjustment of their status to actually confirm that, but certainly the presumption is there. But it really is, it's going to focus on that timing. But you know what? The United States can revoke American citizenship.
I mean, when you join a terrorist organization overseas who is beheading people and fighting against Americans, then maybe that is the case.
Exactly right, Heather. So there is a process. If she is deemed an American citizen, then the United States, there's a process to strip her of that citizenship.
Mercedes, great to see you again. Been a while. Thanks for joining us.
Great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thousands of 9/11 first responders still suffering from life-threatening illnesses and may not get the help they need. There is one solution to bring that on board, so we'll get a live report on that coming up next.
One of the benefits we as a country give our veterans is eligibility.
So discover what over 1 million families we shop.
It's going to be high noon on a Friday. Outnumbered next. The president set to travel to Vietnam Monday, where he plans to hold a second summit with North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un. This is 3 Democrats are accusing the administration of withholding information on that first summit and say the president is contradicting intel leaders on North Korea. But new polling is showing the president's approval on the issue is hitting an all-time high. We'll debate it.
And the billboard battle between Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and a conservative advocacy group is escalating, with new signs slamming the congresswoman for costing New Yorkers $4 billion in salaries because of her role in tanking the Amazon headquarter deal. It's a lot of money.
It's a big show in the center seat. You'll have to find out who is outnumbered at top of the hour.
Cool, ladies. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Thank you. All right. The 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund running out of money, and first responders who depend on that cash are running out of time. Minutes from now, New York City Fire Department holds a news conference urging Congress to act. Brian Yennis live at World Trade Center Plaza here in New York City. Brian?
Hi, Bill. Well, in just moments, New York City firefighters will urge lawmakers to stop major cuts to the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund, money that goes to those sick and dying. Some 2,200 first responders, volunteers, and residents have died from 9/11 related illnesses due to their exposure to the toxic toxic dust that was thrown in the air in the wake of the World Trade Center collapse. And by 2021, those who have died from illness is expected to surpass 3,000, the number of those killed in the 9/11 attacks. The $7.3 billion fund was set up in 2011, and it's running out of money fast. There are $2.3 billion left, and fund administrators say in order to ensure that everyone who needs money gets it, they'll have to cut awards for pending claims by 50% and cut future payouts by 70%. Fund organizers say the cash shortfall is due to a record number of new claims filed in 2018 and a rising cancer rate. Cancer cases are up 35% in just 1 year, climbing from 7,300 to over 10,000 cases.
Firefighters, cops, school children, teachers, residents, office workers. It's everybody who was exposed. Not a day goes by without 10 to 15 new people in the 9/11 community calling me up and saying, Mike, can you help me? I have cancer.
Bipartisan legislation to permanently fund the VCF will be introduced on Monday. As for the cost, they say whatever sum is necessary. Bill?
Thank you, Brian. Brian Yennis here in New York City. Thank you, sir. Heather?
Well, a sign of what's to come as House Democrats introduce a measure to block the president's declaration of a national emergency at the southern border. Where the border battle stands next on Outnumbered.
Introducing the all-new Lexus ES.